Thank you for being with me today. Could you please begin by introducing yourself, telling us what is your area of expertise, your title if you have one, if you can spell out your name and tell us how to pronounce it, and what would you like us to call you?
Sure. My name is Kiel Ortega, Kiel Ortega. I'm a research meteorologist with the University of Oklahoma and in the Cooperative Institute for High Impact Severe Weather Research and Operations. It's a mouthful. And I do my work at NOAA's National Severe Storms Laboratory. My expertise is I do a lot of radar-based severe storm algorithm work, which includes hail detection.
Kyle, thank you for being with us today. You sound like the perfect expert to help us unpack all these questions that we gotten from viewers and within our team about hail. There's so many reports nowadays of hail happening in weird temperatures, and it's such a and it creates such curiosity because it's a cold thing that doesn't necessarily happen in cold weather. Like I remember a few years ago, I was living in Ecuador, and Ecuador is famous for their hailstorms, and it's a tropical weather. They do not have seasons per se. They just have a lot of rain or drought, and then sometimes there are some hailstorms. So, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, what is hail, and how does it happen?
So hail is essentially just frozen water. It's ice that falls out of thunderstorms. Essentially, how it grows is either you eventually have frozen drops that start collect more liquid water. That liquid water freezes, and then eventually it'll fall out as it becomes too large for an updraft to hold the hailstone up in the sky.
How does it become frozen? It's because of the speed that is falling down, and it's just cold temperatures.
Sorry. So how an updraft works is you'll have warm air wanting to rise because there's colder air above it. As that warm air rises, things don't instantly freeze because it takes time. Just like if you take an ice cube out of the freezer, it doesn't just instantaneously melt. So you can actually get water in the frozen regions of a cloud. And so that's how you end up with frozen particles that then collect more water and turn into hailstones.
What is the most common form of precipitation? Is it hail or is it just regular rain?
Probably just regular rain. To really form, hail that's going to reach the surface, you need really strong updrafts, and you also need wind shear in the atmosphere to kind of help the thunderstorms form correctly so that they can actually produce hail.
So are hailstorms more common, and are there certain areas in the country, in the US, where they're more common, and why?
So probably for the United States, they're most common east of the Rockies. Mostly this is just because of the availability of moisture that comes out of the Gulf of Mexico, and then the way that the upper level systems that kind of trigger off thunderstorms move across the country.
Can hailstorms mean that a tornado is on its way? This was a viewer question.
Yeah. So for really big hail, the environments that form those storms that produce the large hail are also the environments that produce tornadoes. So they overlap. One isn't a precursor to another actually occurring.
Is it usually a sign of something bigger, or it's just a storm itself, if that makes sense?
Yeah, the occurrence of hail is just with the storms themselves. It's really not a what's a good word for it? The occurrence of hail with the storms themselves isn't really a precursor to something larger going on.
Is it more? You said that it happens in that area most commonly in that area of the country, that part of the country. What are the ideal temperatures or weather conditions for hail to happen or not to happen?
So temperature wise, for hail to occur, what you want is the freezing level. So where liquid water will actually freeze into ice. You want that close to the surface But you do want warmer temperatures near the surface because you want to form, thunderstorms, which require, pretty powerful updrafts, and that's formed from usually very warm air near the surface. Um, and so ideally you have that freezing level towards lower altitudes, because if it's too high, as the hail falls, it'll melt. So but you don't want it really low, because that probably means that you don't have the correct surface setup, in terms of warmer temperatures there. Um, so that's probably the simplest explanation, at least for temperatures. The other thing you also want is wind shear, which effectively is just either stronger winds up high in the atmosphere compared to down low, or directional changes as well in the wind direction.
What determines the size of hail? Because we've seen that there's sometimes it can be super big, sometimes it can be pea size, snow-like, almost very
Yeah.
small. It- does this can these different sizes be expected in different areas?
Yeah, so when it comes to hail size, that's actually one of the things that we're really researching currently, to try to understand why certain storms produce only small hail, why certain storms produce lots of small hail, and then, of course, those storms that produce the really large stones. Um, it's a combination of whether a storm can kind of organize itself to give favorable paths for the hailstones inside the cloud, and how efficient the storm is at lofting, liquid water to those frozen temperature regions, so you can grow those hailstones to those large sizes. So this is actually a very active area of research currently.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's so much more to understand from them. Is it safe to be outside or drive during a hailstorm?
No, everybody should probably be inside when hail occurs, even small stuff, especially just the hazard to your eyes, is the big thing, and especially driving, that can be dangerous. One thing you definitely don't want to do if you're driving and encounter a hailstorm is to park underneath an overpass. One, you can block traffic. Two, if someone doesn't see you, they could run into the back of you. So the best thing to do, especially if you're driving, is don't even drive into the thunderstorm. But if you happen to be there, pull off and try to shelter at like a gas station or something like that.
Yeah, and it's also very loud, so I'm sure that also
Uh,
creates disturbance.
yeah, I so I do field projects, at my position there at NSSL, and one is to go into thunderstorms into the regions where hail is, and while I get a kick out of the noise, it's not necessarily, something I think a lot of people are used to, because it is kind of a bit of a shock, especially if there's a lot of hail falling.
Is there, in your knowledge, is there any specific parts of your home that hail damages the most, and what can people do to protect themselves?
So it's not really my expertise, but I can say from my personal experience, we had two hailstorms in 2021. So our roof on both of them got damaged to where it needed replaced. We also had to replace all our gutters. Then, of course, anything that we had outside, like flower pots, things like that, were broken. Um, there's really not too much you can do. You're not going to move your house, as a hailstorm approaches. Obviously, the best thing for a car is to be in a garage, or to have some sort of, covering above it. So yeah.
You would say the bigger the hail, the bigger the damage can cause in a car, for example.
It not necessarily. I mean, I think you can get more impressive damage. So very large stones are just going to like punch right through, windshields and things like that. But I've been in hailstorms, that are only golf ball size, but there was a lot of golf balls, and so you can actually get a lot more. You can get a lot of damage that way as well, because maybe only one or two really large stones hit your windshield. But if you have a whole bunch do it, that can lead to, a lot of problems in terms of, the entire glass wanting to kind of push in or fail that way. Um,
Kyle, like Out of all these reports of hailstorms that have happened quite recently, have you seen anything unusual that you haven't seen before?
No, I think what's happening right now, why we quote unquote see more of these very large hailstones is just the availability of cameras and things like that on your phone. I think also the social media aspect, before if something really big happened, maybe you didn't care because there wasn't that initial, that immediate feedback. But with social media, you can throw it out there and be like, hey, look what happened here. So I think that's why, we're seeing more of these events, but I think the events have been occurring. It's just, just the technology of the modern day. So
Yeah, which makes me ask you the next question. So there's nothing per se that people should be concerned about.
I mean, obviously, if a storm's approaching, you should take shelter. I mean, it's not just hail, lightning, wind also. Especially in near your house. If you have trees, if you have loose objects, wind could blow things around, and that could be a hazard. So yeah, so typical thunderstorm precautions are always a safe thing to do, which is be inside, be away from windows.
And there's no, as I don't know if I asked you at the beginning, but there's no specific times of the year where hail is more expected.
So I think if I can recall the climatologies, picking up in March and then kind of tapering off once you hit about August. There's maybe a smaller temporal season for hail there in the fall as you kind of get the almost early springtime environments, set back up briefly before you go into winter.
And thank you so much, Kyle. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think it's important for our audiences to know or to understand, not only about hail, but precipitation in general and understanding this as a part of the natural cycle of water?
So I think there's two little bits of trivia about hail that are kind of neat to know. One is, well, they both concern, we're familiar with there's cloudy ice, clear ice, and sometimes there's layers to it. Um, the first part of that is not from the hailstone going up and coming down and going back up and coming back down. Most hail trajectories from research that's been done by a professor at Penn State has kind of shown that you can kind of track what we call the embryo. So the start of the hailstone, it goes up and then it kind of falls down. Now there's some horizontal movement to that as well. So how the stones get that kind of layering with those different types of ice is actually what temperature that the ice is forming in. So the clear ice is happening at warmer temperatures because you can imagine a raindrop splashing into a hailstone. Well, just like if you drop, an ice cube into a glass of water, you're going to get air bubbles. And so that clear ice forms at warmer temperatures because those air bubbles have a chance to escape. And so the water smooths out and you end up with the clear ice. At colder temperatures, the water freezes more instantly. And so you get that cloudy ice because of the air bubbles being trapped. So that's why you get the different layers. So it just kind of shows you how complex the cloud is itself with the different temperatures when you see those layers in the stone.
Thank you so much, Kyle. I will let you know if we have any follow-up questions. I will keep you guys posted on what happens with the story or the interview. It
Okay.
was really nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.